Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Today we will be continuing our tense classes. We will be talking about the past continuous tense. Before we had covered the past simple tense, the present simple tense, the present continuous tense, and the present perfect tense. We mentioned in the English language there are 12 tenses. Although similar, there are some key differences in each one. For every single tense, we will cover 3 categories. For every single tense, we will cover 3 categories. The categories that we will cover is number 1, usage. So when will we use these tenses? This is the first category. The second category we will be covering is signal or keywords. So in the situations where we use the specific tense, what type of words will be involved? We will cover this in the second category. The third category that we will cover, just like our previous classes in the previous tenses, is the form or the format or the formula in which you will need to follow to create a sentence in the past continuous tense. So today's class we will be covering the past continuous tense.
hore waxaynu soo xusnay in uu Englishku leeyahay 12 tenses oo asaasi ah. Cashirkeena maanta waxa uu ku saabsan yahay past continuous tense. Inaga oo ka farkaraynayna 3 type. Part 1 usage-ka oo ah isticmaalka. Part 2 keywords-ka oo ah kelmadaha la isticmaalayo. Part 3 format-ka oo ah sida aynu u dhisayno kelmadda.
Category number 1, usage. When will we use this tense? In what situations will we use this tense? What are some examples? I will explain to you 4 different situations where this tense is used. For each situation, I'll give you an example. The first situation that we will give an example for the past continuous tense is when you want to talk about an incomplete action, so an action that's not complete, that occurred at one point in the past. So, for example, I was playing some games yesterday, or someone was playing some games yesterday. So what happened at a specific point in the past, we mentioned that timing, and that action itself was not a completed task. So an example, when you want to use this in a sentence, you can say, Jamal was playing games yesterday afternoon. So you mention the action and you also mention the specific time in which it occurred in the past, yesterday afternoon.
qaybta koowaad usage. Xaaladda koowaad aynu isticmaalaynaa waxay tahay marka aynu ka hadlayno ficil dhacay oo aan dhamaanin waqti cayiman. Tusaale ahaan, Jamal ayaa waxa uu ciyaaray game shalay toole galabtii.
Another situation where you will be using the present continuous tense is when you want to talk about an incomplete action that was interrupted. So, for example, yesterday I was doing homework. While I was doing homework, my mother, she called me. This is an example of past continuous tense. So when you want to say this in a sentence, I was doing my homework when my mother called. So the action was I was doing my homework and then I got interrupted by my mother when my mother called. This is another example of when you will be using past continuous tense.
Xaaladda labaad aynu isticmaalaynaa waxay tahay marka aynu ka hadlayno ficil aan dhamaystirmin kaas oo laga soo dhaxgalay. Tusaale ahaan, aniga oo ka shaqeynaya assignment-kayga ayaa ay hooyo ii yeedhay.
Another example when you will use past continuous tense is when you want to talk about two actions that were happening at the same time. So two things were happening at the same time. So for example, my mother, she was cooking, and my dad at the same time, he was reading the newspaper. So both of those actions were happening at the same time. Present continuous tense. So if you want to use this in a sentence, you can say, my mom was cooking while my dad was reading newspaper.
xaaladda kale aynu isticmaalaynaa waxay tahay marka aad ka hadlaysid laba ficil oo dhacay isla waqti taagan. tusaale ahaan, hooyadii qadada ayaa ay karinaysay halka uu aabbahay joornaalka ka akhriyay.
Another example when you will use past continuous tense is when you want to talk about an action that happens many times and it irritates the speaker. So the person speaking is irritating to him, and this action always happens. So for example, I'm a teacher, I'm in class, and there's somebody always speaking in class. So this is something that irritates me as a teacher, and it's happening concurrently. It's happening many times. So if you want to say this in a sentence, you can say, she was always talking in class. She was always talking in class.
xaaladda kale aynu isticmaalaynaa waxay tahay marka aynu ka hadlayno ficil soo noqnoqonaya kaas oo uu dhibsanayo qofka hadlaya. tusaale ahaan, mar walba waxay hadlaysaa iyada oo klaaska ku dhex jirta.
So those four situations that we just mentioned, when you want to talk about an incomplete action that happened at a specific point in the past, or you want to talk about a specific action, an incomplete action that was interrupted, or you want to talk about two things, two actions that were happening at the same time, or you want to talk about something that always happens many times, and it irritates the speaker. So now when you want to actually form your own sentence, what are the type of words that you will use? Category number 2, signal or keywords. Category number 2, signal or keywords. So just like the previous tenses, we went through specific type of words that you will often see in certain situations in the specific tense. So in the past continuous tense, when you're trying to make a sentence, what are some of the words that you will use? So if we look back even at some of the situations, so for example, we know that, okay, if we're in the past continuous tense, when you compare two things, you might realize when you are reading a sentence and you see two things that are being compared in the past, that we are inside the past continuous tense. You are using the past continuous tense.
qaybta labaad waa keywords. Keywords waxa weeyaan kelmadda ku habboon inaad ku hadashid marka aad isticmaalaysid tenskan. hadda waxaynu xusaynaa tusaalayaal ka mid ah keywordska.
So you can use some words like while or when. For example, while I was cooking, Muhammad was reading a book. So you're talking about two things that happened in the past, and we use the word while to specifically illustrate that situation. You can also use the word when you want to talk about something that is reoccurring. So you see an action that happens many times. We gave you the example, she's always talking in class. Always is a good word to use when you want to specifically illustrate that in the past continuous tense. Category number 3. So we said in every single tense, we will talk about the usage, and we will talk about the signal or keywords, and we will talk about the format or the formula or the form that you will need to know when you want to construct a sentence in that specific tense. So in the past continuous tense, how do you create a sentence? Just like our previous tenses. So we said every single time when we want to talk about the format, there will always be two categories. one of the category always stays the same. So that category, as you probably know by now, is positive, negative, and question. Positive, negative, and question. You see a positive sentence, she was cooking when I came. Negative, you are negating it. She wasn't cooking when I came. Question, you're asking something. Was she cooking when you came? So these three categories, positive, negative, and a question, it will always be in the format of every single tense.
qaybta saddexaad waa format oo u kala baxa laba qaybood. qaybta koowaad waxa weeyaan qaab dhismeedka oo u sii kala baxa saddex qaybood oo yaryar. Positive, xaalad dhacday, tusaale ahaan, she was cooking when I came home. Negative, diidmo, she wasn't cooking when I came home. Question, su'aal, was she cooking when I came home?
The second category that we will talk about is the equation. So how can we actually, what is the formula when we actually want to construct a sentence in the past continuous tense? The formula is actually very simple. Number one thing, just like we always mention, you will talk about the subject. So what's being talked about? Who's being talked about? I, he, she, they. So the example that you see on the screen, we used she. She is the subject. In the past continuous tense, there is only two words available after the subject that you can use. Those two words are was and where. Was and where. We're talking the past continuous tense, something that happened in the past. Was and where. Once you use one of those two words, the next thing is you will add the verb. The specific verb, it can be any verb. The only thing that you will add to that verb is the letter ing at the end. So you can use any verb that you want. You will just add the letters ing at the end. So the formula, we're going to talk about the entire formula. It's only those three things: the subject, the word was or where, and the verb with ing at the end. So let's go through an example. In a positive sentence, she, the subject, was, so we said you're going to use was or were. She was cooking. The next thing is the verb plus ing. Cook is the verb, ing at the end. She was cooking when I came. That's all there is to it. The subject, was or where, and the verb with ing. She was cooking when I came. She is the subject, was cook, the verb ing, cooking, when I came.
qaybta labaad formula qaacido. marka uu yahay sentence-ku positive waxaad isticmaalaysaa qaacidadan: subject lagu daray was ama were, lagu daray verbkaas oo la raacinayo ing. tusaale ahaan, she was cooking when I came. She was subject lagu daray was, lagu daray verbka cook oo la raaciyay ing, cooking.
How will we make the negative sentence now? The negative sentence is the exact same. There's no difference. You will just add the word not after was or were. So she was not cooking when I came. That's the only difference. You're just going to add the word not after was or were. She was not cooking when I came. Negative.
marka uu yahay sentence-ku negative waxaad ku daraysaa oo keliyata not, taas oo dhacaysa was ama were dabadooda. tusaale ahaan, she wasn't cooking when I came.
Question, how will you make a question in the past continuous tense? The formula is the exact same thing. The only difference is was or where comes before the subject. So before it used to be subject, was where, verb. Now it's going to be was where, subject, verb. Example, was she cooking? Was, subject she, verb cooking, when you came. And at the end of every single question is a question mark. Was she cooking when you came?
marka uu yahay sentence-ku question waxa aad halka hore soo marinaysaa kelmadda was ama were taas oo noqonaysa was she cooking when you came.
Was she cooking when you came? She was cooking when I came, positive. She was not cooking when I came, negative. Was she cooking when I came? Question. This concludes our class today for the past continuous tense. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.